what's up? It's another episode. I have done so many of these now and watched so many films, over 450 now, that I fight the urge to try and always do films that are similar in some way because I like the idea of it just kind of being random. And the other day I was up early. I'm up early every day, but I was up early and I happened to turn on the TV. I generally don't do that, but I turned on the TV and, I've mentioned in the past, sometimes I watch films on a free streaming service like Pluto or Freevee or whatever it's called, that they basically run content. They run films, TV shows, news or whatever all day. And it's got commercials and stuff, but it's already just going, right? And, I turned on the TV the other day and it just returned or resumed back into Pluto. And what movie was it playing? Empire Records, right? Have you ever seen that? It's from the mid 90s. And it's a very specific point in time. It's a very specific type of film. The teenagers coming of age, kind of gang of kids hanging out in a record store, that kind of thing. And I was sitting there watching it. I wasn't really watching it. I just had the TV on and it's the first thing that showed up. And, it reminded me, it just took me back to a moment when I was younger and TV, broadcast TV or cable TV was really the only thing you could watch, right? There was no internet. There was certainly no streaming services and there was no on-demand aspect to it. So you couldn't go and find the thing you wanted to watch and start it from the beginning and watch exactly the episode or the thing that you were looking for. You just kind of took whatever was coming out of the water faucet, And it just took me back to that moment in time, that period, that era where you turned on the TV and whatever was on, that's what you were watching. And if you didn't like it, you could change the channel. And if you didn't like that, you could change it again, right? Until you kind of run out of options and then you maybe turn the TV off. But sometimes you were able to stumble upon something new and maybe you caught it halfway or maybe you caught it right at the end. But it was enough to give you a clue of hey, this is something I want to see now. Like the few moments that I caught here, this looks interesting. I got to catch this the next time it's on. And then that's kind of how you maybe discover some new things or expand your horizons a little bit. Now, I feel like with everything being on demand, it's actually more difficult to find new things. Even though it's all presented to you, it's kind of like that thing of, well, look, you can look at all the book covers you want. They don't tell you if it's a good story inside the book, right? And so here it's like if you go to Netflix or Hulu or whatever, you see all the little cover graphics or the art for those, the posters, whatever. And that might give you an idea of who's in it, maybe what it's about, or at least the tone of it. Maybe the title kind of can be a clue of what you're in for, but you really don't have a sense of the quality of it or the pace of it. It's hard to know without seeing a part of it. And I know that's what trailers are for, but come on, trailers, they can be misleading or they can be badly done. They can just give you the wrong slant on what it is that this film, this story is actually going to be once you get into it. And so watching, 10, 15 minutes of Empire Records just by chance and just in the middle of the film, it reminded me of that time where, yeah, you could kind of learn about a new film without even meaning to, and maybe find something that is interesting or intriguing and want to search it, want to chase it down and find it and watch it completely, right? And I kind of miss that. And there's something about that, like watching a film early in the day. I don't know what it is. I mean, part of it, I guess, is I think traditionally you would watch a film in a theater in the afternoon or in the evening, specifically like, weekends or at night with friends or with, your partner or whatever, like date night kind of thing. But watching a film early in the morning, especially if it's like a film that's got a little bit of an edge to it, or, where it feels like, hey man, maybe it's a little too early for some of this language or this, I don't know, violence or whatever it is. It's a weird vibe. And I remember enjoying that in a way, kind of just being able to sit with that for a moment and be like, it's kind of like something I'm not supposed to be doing right now, isn't it? Not that it's a bad thing, but it's just like, this is not traditionally when you would watch a movie or the type of thing you would be feeling at that time of day. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. And maybe for younger people, maybe that's not even a thing you even relate to, of like, if you've never known anything besides Netflix or on-demand stuff, it's like the idea of putting on the TV and just seeing whatever happens to be playing at the moment and either vibing with it or not, but to know like, oh, this is the only option I have. It's a really distinct and for me, I found a nice way to remind myself of like, this is why I do this. This is why I am pushing myself to like watch new things and to learn from them, but also to just have that experience. And sometimes, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I watch some stuff that I kind of wish I had the time back for, but I'm at least trying to look at it in the sense of what can I learn from this? Whether I can learn like, hey, this is something to look out for the next time you want to watch a film from this filmmaker or in this genre or from this time period. Or it's like, is there anything I can learn in terms of the actual craft, right? Like the storytelling side of it, the technical side of it. Because that is something that I try to do, I have done, and I, of course, aspire to do more of, is some film work, some narrative, some creative work. And so part of this is just learning what else is out there, but also learning from it and maybe refining my own ideas or my own skills, I think anybody who's into films and maybe has a knack for creating films, I feel like that's where we all kind of watch, right? We watch it on a couple of different levels. And so, all that to say, don't necessarily dismiss these free streaming services or even just regular old cable TV, which don't do that. Because you're paying for it and they still give you commercials. Don't do that. Just, do the free streaming thing. You'll sit through some commercials here and there, but you at least get the full films. You don't get the, crazy edited for TV versions like they used to do. Maybe they still do. And you have actually way more choices that are relevant to you. That's what I found. Like I said, in those Godzilla episodes I did a while back, Pluto itself has an entire channel just of Godzilla or kaiju content. It's just 24/7. That's all you get on that one channel. And there are dozens of channels like that. And so that's where I feel like there's a real value there because, hey, you might find something new. You might find something interesting that you hadn't really thought was your bag, So all that said, let me get to a couple of films I watched. I did a double feature from the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan, respectively. And I thought, well, let me look for another double feature. What else could I find that maybe pairs up kind of nice together? Two films that I did find that aren't necessarily related in terms of the subject matter or the stories, but in terms of how they were done. The recent film Self Reliance from writer, director, and star Jake Johnson, who I just really enjoy watching in a lot of films that I've seen him in. He was in New Girl, of course. He even has a podcast now with Gareth Reynolds, which is kind of one of those, call-in advice type things. I mean, hey, there's a space for it, I'm sure. I'm glad that it's at least more of a comedy type thing. It's not super serious. I appreciate it. Here, I wanted to watch this film because I felt like that's a really ambitious swing to be the writer, the director, and the star. And to, as far as I know, really be new to two of those roles. I know he's been in a lot of things as an actor. I don't know if he's written a lot of things. I don't think he's directed a feature film before. So that really, it just caught my attention, and I wanted to see, like, well, how does this go down? Like, does this really work? And not to say that it couldn't and it shouldn't, but it's great if it does, right? And you see it from other actors / filmmakers or whatever that do take on multiple roles, and it does work. Sometimes they're not all three of those. Sometimes they're the writer and the director. Sometimes they're director and the star. It's very rare, I think, when you have someone who does three or more roles, but it does happen. And to me, the thing that it kind of indicates is like, it's a very kind of indie film approach where you have to wear multiple hats. You have to be able to do multiple things at the same time somehow and still come out with a result that makes sense and that actually works, that does connect. And so I went into this film with high expectations, but also a little bit hesitant because I want to give someone the benefit of the doubt. And this film, I mean, it's kind of a story that I think we've seen before, but the approach here is different enough where I feel like, okay, I see what's happening. We're carving out a different lane. The premise of it is Jake Johnson, who plays his character Tommy. He's kind of a I don't want to say a schlub, but he's just a guy who's kind of down in life. He's got an ex that he's kind of stuck on, like he can't quite get over. He's catching some grief from his mother and his sisters, and he's just not in a good place in life. And he gets into this situation, this proposal, which at first it kind of comes off like the beginning of Squid Game. It's like Andy Samberg like rolls up to him on the street and says, hey, do you want to be in a reality show where you have to survive 30 days and you cannot be caught alone? Because if you're alone, you are a target and you will be killed, right? And if you survive the 30 days, you win the show, you win the contest or whatever. And so that premise right there alone, the idea of like, you just got to survive this thing. And not only will you come out with your life, but you'll come out with a prize or some sort of reward. But then, of course, in storytelling terms, you're going to come out as a better person. You're going to come out with some kind of growth. And so here it is more of a kind of a darkly comedic take on that kind of thing. Because we see Tommy here, he's down for the game, but he's trying to find ways maybe around the rules or the stipulations of the game. And so his first thing is like, well, I just don't need to be alone. So I'm just going to ask my mother and sisters. And they're like, no, this is weird. You're dumb. Get lost. Right. So you think, okay, well, wow. Okay. This guy can't even depend on his own family. So what is he going to do? And he tries staying with a friend. That doesn't work out because it's weird. he ends up hiring a homeless guy to just follow him around, to just stick with him, like attached at the hip. And that introduces some funny moments. But the thing I started to notice as the film goes on is like he does reiterate, Tommy reiterates over and over to all these different characters. It's like, I can't be alone. Like I can't, that's how I'm going to survive this game. I can't be alone. I cannot be by myself. And I think as soon as you kind of reframe that, like take it out of that context, you have this character just saying and pleading in ways that he can't be alone. I think that's where we start to see like I guess the metaphor here of here's a man who's stuck and kind of hit a wall in life. And his thing is not that he can't be alone to survive the game, but he can't be alone in his life, right? Like these are things that he's finding he needs other people around, or he thinks he needs other people around. He thinks he needs other people to help him, to depend on. And it's about him really overcoming that sense of, I don't know, is that like technically codependence or some sort of tendency like that? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. But even later in the film, he meets Maddie, played by Anna Kendrick, who is really that person. You know, we see that, okay, Tommy is in this thing, this arrangement with this game or this show. Turns out Maddie just kind of pretended to be also in that same show under the same pretense of like, okay, well, I can't be alone either. So let's gang up. Like we'll always be around each other and we'll never be at risk. We'll never be a target. And turns out it was really just her way to, I don't know, make a friend, have a friend. And she's not in the show at all. There's enough commentary going on in the movie about what it means to be on your own and the challenge of kind of finding your own way in life. And I get it. And I like it. I think that by the end of the film, when it really becomes clear, like we're kind of seeing a different take on the game with Michael Douglas, you know, David Fincher film from the late 90s. And part of me said, and that's because there's a reveal at the end of the film of like what is really actually going on. And so I think it was great up until the end. And not that the end was bad, but I just felt like it went in a different direction than I thought it was going to go. Like I thought we were really going to commit to this show and the stakes of Tommy's life being on the line. And it doesn't really go there. Now, our character, of course, he still gets his moment. He still gets his growth, right? But I think that's part of where, you know, hey, look, the film just kind of zagged when I thought it was going this way. It went that way. And it still works for the most part. I think it's maybe a little different than I thought. Now, I'll say this, though. In terms of the filmmaking, in terms of even the writing and the acting, everything, I think Jake Johnson just knocks it out of the park. I mean, this is a solid film. It's well done. All the actors, the performances, they all feel right for this kind of film. Like it's kind of dark, but it's also funny. It's got some real like laughs in it, I think. And that just kind of strikes me as, from what I've seen of his other work, that kind of strikes me of his sensibility, of his lane. So I feel like this was a really good match. Like he wasn't trying to go outside of his particular style of comedy or style of roles that he's done. And that's good. That's where you want to start, right? If this is like a first effort, like of taking on this kind of a project, this isn't like science fiction. There's no dragons in it. You know, it doesn't got magic. It's not in the past, you know, it's very much like in a good space where you can do some cool stuff and it still works and it's not overwhelming, right? So I enjoyed it. I think if you've never seen the game, this might feel like a real fresh type of premise, but there's a little bit of a overlap in those things. But I think on its own, it works just fine. So From what I know, I think that's like a Hulu exclusive. I don't know if you can see it anywhere else, but that's where I saw it. So maybe check it out, you know. To top that off, I said, well, look, here is a double feature. This Self Reliance, directed by, written by, starring Jake Johnson. There's another film that came out last year, 2023, called Fool's Paradise, written by, directed by, starring Charlie Day, which honestly, to my mind, I guess, kind of feels like a very similar type of presence, you know? Not, I don't think they look alike. I don't think they sound alike, and nothing like that. But I feel like they're in very similar lanes, you know? I feel like they kind of run parallel, just in terms of like, I don't know, recognizability, if that's the right thing. I just feel like if you know who Jake Johnson is, you probably know who Charlie Day is, and vice versa, right? They've both been in very successful TV shows, but also been in films, in comedies, and kind of has a very distinct demeanor and style to a lot of the roles that he plays, you know? And I don't know if that's just a personality thing, but, you know, I just, watching all those Godzilla films recently, I watched Pacific Rim, and he's in that, and he even brings that kind of manic, kind of madcap energy to Pacific Rim in a good way. I think it really works for that film. And so I said, all right, well, look, here's a double feature. It's another comedic actor, done TV, done film, taking on a project in 3 different roles, the 3 of the same roles, right? So let's check this out. Now, this film is very different than what I expected. I really don't know what I expected. I think I know what the goal was. I don't really know if it got there. I mean, here we have Charlie Day. He plays a character who we first see him in, I don't know, it's like a psych ward or like an institution. He doesn't talk. He kind of doesn't even really seem to understand a lot. And, you know, because this is a comedy, the physicians, the caretakers there, you know, they're like trying to decide what to do with him because they can't find a way to get through to him, to communicate with him. And the take on it is like, well, you know, the state's not going to help us, so we're going to put him on a bus downtown. Okay. So this guy is out on the street now in Los Angeles, and he happens to run into a, I guess, kind of out of his luck agent or like a publicist, someone who's looking for a client, like an actor to represent, to get work, to get work for himself, but to kind of help, you know, get into the business. And so here, this character who is kind of nameless as we first meet him, he ends up taking on the name of Latte Pronto because Ray Liotta is a film producer that just needs his latte right away. And that's the name that this guy, that just sticks with him. Charlie Day's nameless character who, you know, it's hard to talk about this film without pointing out all the problems I have with it. And it's not because it's a bad film. It's just, I feel like it's trying to do a couple too many things that it probably didn't need to do. And it's even going in a slight, it's taking a different slant on something that I think could actually work in a really good way. Here's what I'll say. This character that Charlie Day plays, Latte Pronto, he doesn't talk through the entire film, except for one moment. He kind of does a silent Bob, right? And it's not so much that he's not good in it. Like Charlie Day, I think he has like a real, he has like a good sense of like physical comedy and that timing that you need and the energy, right? He does a lot of like face acting, of course. But I think a recognizable thing with Charlie Day is his voice and his pitch, he can take it high, and he's got like range, and that works for comedy. And so to take away his voice for this entire film, I mean, he does play a guy that is kind of a shitty prima donna actor, and that guy ends up dying. And this character, Latte Pronto, is like a lookalike and takes over and becomes the lead actor in a film. It's kind of a weird, like Prince and the Pauper kind of tale, I guess. So like that right there, that's a little bit of a head scratcher of like, why did we have to include that? Like, just make this guy somehow stumble into success. That's cool. But to make him like replace a guy that looks just like him, but that is kind of a jerk, and yet somehow he makes that work when the other guy couldn't make it work. It's just an extra layer of something we really didn't need. Like, make this guy like a Forrest Gump. Like, he just fumbles his way into Hollywood and into becoming a superstar. I would go with that a lot easier than the whole body swapping, look-alike kind of thing. That was kind of unnecessary, really. The other thing is there's so much in this film that is really sending up a lot of Hollywood industry types, the mechanisms of how things work, even, actors and producers and publicists and all those different people that you meet, and the people who are out for themselves, the people who are just fucking weird. If you've been around films, and even like in a small scale, there are people who are eccentric. There are people who are probably just not really what they say they are. And it's fine. It happens in every industry, really. But with film, because it's so artificial, I think it just stands out. And it's just ripe for being made fun of. And so this film, I think, has the right idea of like, hey, let's just make a farce about everything that's wrong, everything that's weird about Hollywood. There was that film Soap Dish from, was it like the early 90s? Where it was kind of doing a similar thing with like TV soap operas, right? It's kind of showing us behind the scenes, showing us about how messed up things are, how weird things are, and making a comedy out of it. But here it's like you've got that on top of the guy who's playing the guy that's the other guy. And then you've also got like this guy doesn't talk. And then there's like a romantic story aside to this where he kind of falls in love with Kate Beckinsale. And like they have this whole relationship, and it's weird and it's not real. And then Ken Jeong, who plays the agent, who is kind of looking out for himself, but also kind of trying to do the right thing while also looking out for himself, but then has his redeeming moment or whatever. It's just a lot of things that are going on. And I feel like this could have been a lot simpler in terms of, I don't know, the approach to this character, like make this film about this character. And then I think you've got something. But if you're making it about Hollywood and this character just being a part of that, let's pick which angle we want to take here. I think that's kind of how I came away from this film. It's like, I think I'm seeing two different takes on this subject matter. I wish it would have worked better. And, it's funny because I think, all right, well, look, you want to have a character who's silent throughout the whole film and just have him be in these circumstances, in these situations, and how does he kind of work through them? I mean, hey, look, Mr. Bean did that. And Mr. Bean is, of course, an old TV show, and they've done, I think, a movie or two. But the premise of this character who is a little bit dim, doesn't say anything really, but has great physical presence and comedic timing, and finds his way in and out of these weird situations. I mean, I think that nails it right there. And I feel like this film could have been something like that. But it's such a big swing trying to take on all these other elements and threads that it dilutes the strength of this character. Also, I just, I get the idea of like the guy just gets saddled with the name, but Latte Pronto. I mean, I guess that is kind of a commentary on its own of like some of these actors, musicians, artists that give themselves or somehow are deemed these ridiculous names, and people, because they want to be professional or they want to be, in the industry, they refer to these people as these names, right? It's like, and that's not the real name. I guess that's the idea, is like these people are so willing to just do whatever to get along. They'll call you by your dumb name. I mean, I guess if you have people who are somewhat, I don't know, respected or acclaimed or whatever, you have like like a Lady Gaga or something. Obviously not her name, stage name only, right? But, there are people that work for her, work around her, that's what they call her. But her name is Stephanie, right? And that's just one example, of course. But, there are people in industries like this that are about personas, that this is the experience. It's like, I'm going to call you by your dumb name and believe it and say it with a straight face. So I feel like there's a lot of good ideas here. I feel like there's a lot of good angles you could have taken, but I just feel like this kind of takes them all on at the same time. And it just dilutes the film overall. I think Charlie Day didn't do himself a favor by not speaking in the role. And I get, that's the character or whatever. Maybe it's even by designs. Like, I don't got to memorize lines because I got other things I'm doing on this film. I get that. But I think it hurts the story overall. It hurts the impact of this character when he doesn't talk. There's some gags in the film that you just need like one or two shots of it. It just needs to go on for like maybe 10 seconds, but it goes on for like a few minutes. And you know what? That was actually a thought too. As I was watching the film, I thought this is a really interesting premise, and it's a fun take on this subject matter. And yet I feel like this would have really worked better as a short film. You make this a 20-minute short film, just condense some of the gags, condense some of the characters and some of these plot lines. This would have been a really solid, just like home run of a short film, I think. And so it doesn't change my feeling about Charlie Day. I still think he's a great, talented actor. And I want to see if he's going to write and direct more things, because I feel like he's got at least a certain vision and a certain approach to comedy. But I don't know if this was really it, And it kind of sucks. I mean, it's a bummer to say that. The other thing is like this film has a stacked cast. I mean, I'd say like Ken Jeong is in it and Ray Liotta. Who else was in this? Kate Beckinsale. I mean, there's a ton of like cameos in here because it is kind of in Hollywood. So you've got Adrian Brody's in this. There's a lot of people that, if you're familiar with like, the comedy scene or comedic actors or character actors, there's a lot of people in this film. And so I feel like that's a strength, and maybe on a different project, all that kind of being able to call in favors like that or bring people into the fold, that can really work in your benefit, right? So yeah, of course. I want to see what else Charlie Day and Jake Johnson do after these films. For the things I did like, and even the things I didn't like, I'm still interested. I'm still down. I want to see more. So that's what I got for this week. That's this episode. I just wanted to do another double feature. And of course, I just, had to talk about watching cable TV in the morning, I guess. I talked to some people recently about this podcast, and if you're listening to this and because of that, or, you just kind of catching episodes randomly, maybe you stumbled upon this. Thanks for listening. Thanks for checking this out. If you want to find some other episodes, you want to subscribe, you can do that wherever you get podcasts. You can go to filmstreak.com, and there you'll find not only these episodes, but you'll also find the list to all of the films I've talked about so far. It's a list on IMDb. We're over 450 films now. And there, I mean, you can rate them. You can add them to your own watch list, kind of get into the same situation I'm in. With IMDb now, you can even see if they're streaming somewhere, or get tickets, I guess, if it's something in the theaters. It's a handy thing. That's what I use it for. So go there, do that, and hey, stay out of this heat, right? This is crazy. Maybe a nice, cold, dark theater. And while you're there, go watch something new.